So in the second quarter of 2020, gross domestic product, which is the total value of goods and services sold within the United States, fell by 32.9%. That happened between April and June as the first wave of lockdowns started to kick in. Millions of Americans lost their jobs, thousands of businesses closed because of the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, that doesn't mean that the economy lost a third of its value in just those 3 months. What it means is that if the pace of the economic collapse in those 3 months continued for an entire year, the economy would have lost about a third of its value in that time. But if we're measuring just the loss between the first quarter of 2020 and the second, that's about a 9.5% drop in gross domestic product. So this was a record-breaking economic collapse in both size and speed. We've never seen the economy lose this much of its value in this short of a time frame. And that's what really sets this recession apart from the Great Recession in 2008 to the Great Depression in the 1930s. That took a lot longer to unwind and a lot longer for that damage to take hold because unlike the coronavirus pandemic, these were situations that had one kind of shock moment that caused a lot of economic chaos in its wake. With the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of the harm came through that initial shock toward the end of March and the beginning of April, when wide swaths of the American economy had to entirely shut down. Over the course of May and June, the economy gained back about 8 million of the 20 million or so jobs that were lost in March and April. But as we've seen a second wave of coronavirus cases, that in and of itself has slowed the pace of growth. We're seeing more people apply for unemployment benefits in the past 2 weeks than in the previous weeks. Those numbers, after decreasing for about 4 months every week, have started to increase over the past 2 weeks. And for about 4 months now, we've seen about 2 million people apply for unemployment benefits for the first time. That indicates that while the economy started to reopen and started to recover, we're still seeing a lot of businesses that may have run out of fiscal support from Congress through the Paycheck Protection Program, businesses that thought they might be able to weather this for a couple of months, but are realizing that this is actually going to take a lot longer to get back to normal economic capacity. So they're closing, they're laying off workers. So it's hard to say what's going to happen in the third quarter. Most economists will tell you that it really depends on the country's progress in containing the virus. We haven't seen much hard and fast from the White House yet. The president and his economic advisors for a while have insisted that the economy will be ripe for a rebound in the second half of the year. That was premised on the first wave of the coronavirus being contained and the country on whole making progress, with the exception of having to handle, an uptick in cases when the economy reopened. But because the virus has started surging across the country and to levels we hadn't seen earlier, it makes it increasingly unlikely that that major second half rebound that the White House is looking for, especially right before the election, is going to happen.
So I think when it comes to Americans' response to Trump's handling of the economy, there are a few things going on. First big thing is that we see divisions along political party lines. So Republicans, no matter what Trump seems to do, they overwhelmingly support him in droves. On the other hand, we see Democrats. They overwhelmingly do not support what he's doing. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing that's going on is related to race, that we see that whites are about split, which is on par with their political party representation. But when it comes to blacks and Latinos, they are much more likely to disapprove of what Trump is doing. The third main thing, as we continue to see unemployment claims come out, and over 50 million Americans have filed for unemployment for the first time, that as COVID-19 is ravaging throughout the South and across the southern part of the United States, from Florida to Texas to Arizona, and then even a resurgence in California, we are also starting to see in the Midwest and the Great Plains that COVID-19 is spiking. These states and these areas oftentimes are more conservative areas. They tend to vote Republican when it comes to the presidential election. And so I think that the dip we've seen in the support for Trump in the economy is related to that. And I think that that's going to get worse over the coming weeks as we see COVID-19 start to hit those communities, particularly rural communities in the middle part of the United States.
While he's not been able to be out there talking consistently about the economy, because there's a question mark with all the spending that is going on in terms of relief packages, care packages, if you will, talking about another one right now, and question marks about the rising unemployment and are we in a recession, are we facing towards a depression, is that his talking about the economy in a cheerleader way is not effective. And he's not receiving any data that really helps him prop up those numbers. So for most of his presidency on the economy, he's been hovering around 60% approval. And he's now dropped about 10 points on that. His negatives have come up about 10 points on that. It is still the issue that is his strongest issue. And so the economy is still going to be the key to his recovery somewhat in the data. But finding the right time and the right place to do that is one of the questions. I think it may be coming out more about the time of the convention. But the second part of that is that he has to be a little bit careful of not falling back into the all they see is persona, because that is not going to serve him well. Attitudes on that have only deepened throughout his presidency, deepened in terms of intensity, not deepened in terms of getting deeper on the overall numbers. And so that's kind of the scenario of what he's facing. He needs the economy. He needs to be able to talk about the economy. And lacking that, you're going to see this campaign sputter along kind of where it is right now.